On this episode, we discuss some facts and details of raising a kid in Bangkok that people without kids might not have thought about.
So if you're about to have kids in Bangkok or don't have them and want to learn what parents have to deal with, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 to develop my dream of mixing Thai fish and felines to develop Siamese fighting cats. But it turns out doing genetic experiments on animals is not only illegal, but really hard to figure out.
That might have been a tad too ambitious.
Yeah.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 20 years ago. Fell in love with 20-minute downpours that lead to flash floods, but then dry streets 1 hour later. So I never left.
That's so trippy when that happens.
I mean, it is actually weird because sometimes it rains so hard that you start, replanning your day.
Yeah.
But then an hour later you go outside and it's dry and you're like, wait a minute, did it rain or not?
Yeah, that's right. It's just, but it feels like a sauna. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah. That's a Thai thing. So if you're listening to this saying like, what is he talking about? Well, that means you just haven't stayed here long enough.
That's right.
It's definitely a Thai thing. Okay, we want to say a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, behind-the-scenes photos and videos of our interviews, discounts on swag, access to our Discord server, and various other things that aren't available to regular listeners. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and random topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about my 21st anniversary in Thailand, how the TAT will now allow those vaccinated with the Russian S5.E24 vaccine into Phuket, and how fans of kratom, the Thai herb, can now get their fix on as the drug has finally been decriminalized in Thailand. To become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
All right. Well, hey, before we jump into it, I want to give a quick shout out to my buddy Carl in Canada. And Ed, check this out. Carl and I went to junior high school together and high school together, and we've stayed in touch all these years. And I think Carl is the only person I know in Canada, including anyone of my family, who listens to the podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In all of Canada?
All of Canada.
Is that for real?
I can't think of any one of my friends who listen on any regular basis. Maybe Brendan does a little bit, but Carl says he listens to almost every show. So big shout out to Carl for
Heck yeah. Thank you, Carl.
Keeping that friendship alive. That's what real friends do, man. 30 years later, listen to a podcast.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, on this episode, we are going to continue a discussion that Ed and I had recently where I was telling him about some of the things that you have to think about when you have a kid in Thailand. And it struck me that Ed had never thought about some of it, which is not surprising because why would you? You don't have any kids.
True that.
So regular listeners know that I have a 6-year-old son. So I thought it'd be fun to discuss some of the tips and trivia that parents here in Bangkok have to learn through cold, hard trial and error, but which those without kids would obviously not have much of an inkling of. So Ed, what do you think about this?
Well, first, I want to make clear, you are familiar with the universal law that applies to the entire multiverse, that people who don't have kids are entitled to lecture people with kids about the best way to raise children.
Yeah, we love that. So anyone out there who doesn't have kids, please send in your thoughts and strategies for dealing with kids to gopoundsand@gmail.com. And
I think it's so funny because if there's one thing, I remember, this is just a weird memory, but I remember one of my professors, I don't even remember the exact context, one of my professors way back in the day saying something like, getting married doesn't change your life at all.
Not really, no.
But having a kid changes your life forever. And I don't know, for some reason, it's stuck into my mind. And, the bottom line is when you get married, typically you've been dating for a while, been exclusive, maybe even living together. So, of course, it's formal, it's public. But to the way he said, I mean, I don't know what was going on with his life, but the way he said, the moment you have a kid, your life is never the same. And I was like, oh,
that's right.
I was like,
that's what I thought. The only thing that
damn.
changed when I got married was that my left hand got slightly heavier.
Right.
But when I have a kid, like your life just gets tossed up into a ball and thrown into the trash can, and you're like, okay, new life. Press print.
To me, it's as someone who is known to pontificate, I would say I've been pretty good about. I mean, to me, this is so obvious that if you don't have kids, you should not be giving advice to people who do have kids.
It's not.
to me, it's so obvious that I think I hopefully I don't think I've been one of those guys. So this would not even be an expat stereotype. This would be just like some kind of general stereotype.
Just general nosy person stereotype. I also should say here, I grew up absolutely adamant that I was never going to have a kid. I was never interested in children.
Wow.
I never held a baby until my son was born. I was just not interested.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But now I'm all about being a dad, which is pretty cool. But
you sure are. I would consider you somewhat of an expert. And I would say as an expat, you've got some extra things to think about, which is what this show's about.
Oh, thanks, man. That's good. And also, I should say, I'm not one of those parents who would go around saying like, oh, you got to have kids. It'll change your life. It'll complete you. Like, man, kids are not for everyone. And some people out there would not be good parents. Some people out there would not enjoy it because it is real hard sometimes, and more power to them. So I don't think that everyone needs kids to prove anything or to validate themselves, which is just kind of horse pucky. But if you want them, great. If you don't want them, great. Everyone do your own thing. But I got one, so this is what we're going to talk about.
Sure. And the other thing is, Greg's going to give some advice and talk about the things you have to think about, the things that a parent has to think about that a non-parent does not if you live in Thailand.
Yeah.
But of course, there's not one formula for how to live your life. And, Greg's worked out his solution to the problem of being a parent, if you want to call it a problem. But of course, there's
what
other
day it is, I guess.
Right. There might be other ways to handle this. But I got to say this. Let me talk about the first thing, just because I think this is something we're going to kind of strike off our list. It's obvious from all the parents I know here that almost their number one concern is quality education for their kids. So whatever that means, whether it's international schools or good Thai schools or whatever that means, but it seems, I think I've scored a bullseye here. Have I scored a bullseye? I think this is your probably number one thing.
Yeah, you have non-parent ed. It's a good one. And we're not going to talk about it too much because we have mentioned it on the show before, and it is very obvious. But very quickly, the sort of the quote-unquote free Thai education system is not very good. And a lot of expat parents probably wouldn't want to put their kids in those schools, generally speaking, not a blanket statement, but so what's left is an international school, and some of the more expensive international schools can run up to and over $1 million baht a year, which is about $30,000 US.
Sure.
You're talking for a grade 1 child, $30,000.
That's my beer budget, dude. I mean, that's a lot of money.
So everything about being a parent revolves around the decision of school, and every decision you make will be inspired and related to that school decision, because when that's the main issue that you're going to have to deal with for the next 18 years ish.
For sure. So, as a neophyte, when I imagine this problem, I see how it multiplies, because it's not just the cost, it's the commute, it's what the student, what your kid will be studying. I mean, there's so many different factors. To me, it becomes a very like the practicalities of getting up every day and getting your kid to a certain place is such a practical. It's like an immediate. Even though I guess education is this long-term abstract whatever. The bottom line, your decision is like, what time does my alarm go off? How much time is it going to take to get here? Then we got to go here. And and you got to do that 5 days a week, 9 months out of the year. Yeah, 9 months out of the year for 18 years. Yeah. So I mean, it's so practical. It's like it's very much like no, that's going to take 5 minutes too long, or I'll have to take a left turn in traffic with that red light. So we're not going to that school.
And and Bangkok is a very different place to go to school, because in most Western countries, Obviously, we should have said before, this show comes at it from the perspective of an expat parent in Thailand. So, this is not advice to Thai people. But, when we were kids, and I guess in a lot of Western countries, you either walk to school or you take the bus. You can't really walk to school here, not unless you're very close to the school or you're an older kid.
Right.
It's not an option.
Right.
So it's either it's bus or chauffeur or drive. And some people spend 2 hours or more every day one way driving to school to get their kid to school and 2 hours on the way back. That becomes a quality of life issue. Why would you want to sit in a car for 2 hours when you could be at home spending it with your kid, right?
No.
It's funny what you said about the cost and how long you're sitting in traffic and what they're learning, because for me, I've boiled it down to what I call the 3 C's. The most important one is cost.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Because like I said, some international schools can cost a lot of money. There are some options. My son goes to a mid-level school, which is nowhere near that, which is good because there's no way we could live if that was the case. But there are options, and you do have to make some sacrifices. The second C is the commute. Again, if you're spending
for sure.
Yeah. Again, if you're spending more than a couple of hours in a car with your kid on the way to school every morning, and then you have to deal with a rainy season, and then you have to deal with it sucks. And the third one is the curriculum. So obviously you want your kid to be getting it's a British curriculum or an Australian curriculum or an American curriculum. There's even a Canadian international school in Bangkok.
Oh wow,
Canadian curriculum. Yeah, my friend is a principal there. But anyway, so those 3 things are very, very, very important. And I would go so far as to say that if you're new to Thailand or are coming to Thailand with kids, find out where they're going to school first and then decide where you're going to live, because you don't want those 2 things to be on the opposite sides of the city.
Yeah, to me, I think it's definitely number one. So that's kind of undebatable. Yeah. So I'm going to take credit for that. But what other than that, what do you breeders care about?
Well, the other thing is, I sort of feel guilty about this, but when people knock Bangkok's shopping malls, oh great, another shopping mall, there's a little part of me that goes, oh good, great, another place to take my kid.
This is great. I've been with your son in the mall, and this is something as a non-parent I never would have understood. So, okay. But you've opened my mind to this, that, malls in Bangkok, they're air conditioned, right? Yeah. Which just makes it means like it's just much more relaxed and you can spend more time there. In general, there's a lot of stuff to do, including movie theaters, but many of them often do have a children's area. Right. So it's they've taken the time to make it kid friendly.
Yeah, and Thailand is a very kid-centric culture, so there are great things that cater just to kids. Thailand obviously is not the only country that does it, but here there are big kid playgrounds, like giant playgrounds where they can go and run around. There's kid-only movie theaters with slides and ball pits as the movie is playing, and there's a lot of infrastructure dedicated to taking care of kids.
Man, I know nothing like that stuff that you just described. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like ball pits and movies. Yeah, like that sounds a little bit creepy. Okay, it's I don't awesome. Know what. It's so funny how there is this whole infrastructure, and then if you don't have kids, you're just blind to it.
Exactly.
I have no idea where. I have no idea what you're talking. It's like you're speaking a foreign language.
And of course, it is important to take your kid out into a park once in a while, and every kid loves running around and kicking a ball or whatever and climbing trees. So my son and I, we could take our bike, pre and post COVID, hopefully, we go to Lumpini Park and we ride our bikes and we run around and stuff like that, which is very important. But, after 45 minutes of that, you're just drenched in sweat.
Sure.
You're thirsty as hell. You're sucking down water and Gatorade. So it's not something that you want to do all the time. And sometimes when you see a new mall going up as a parent, you're like, awesome, another mall.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's funny because when I grew up, the malls were a place you only went to shop. But then when you became a teenager, you could hang out there, but your parents didn't want you to do that.
Right. Bad influence.
So it really wasn't. I don't remember the malls being a kids thing. I mean, I guess there must have been play areas, but I don't remember that.
Dude, the last time I went back to a mall in Canada, it was just depressing as hell. They're lame, dingy, dead-end joints with Chinese food buffet and a nail salon. Like it's like copy, paste.
Wow.
That was it, man.
Well, they do seem to have evolved. Like they tend to be more outdoor now. Like when I went back to my hometown, I just felt like the malls were flashier and they were kind of outdoors and spread out.
All right, well, that's some good developments then, I guess. So
they seemed hipper, but yeah, the old school kind of indoor mall. You're right. It's very passé, huh?
Yeah. One other thing that I learned very quickly here was that when you have a kid, you got to buy a stroller, right? You got to put your baby in the stroller and push it around.
I would assume so. Yeah.
When my wife and I bought our first stroller, we went shopping and we're like, oh, this one looks pretty good. Yeah, it does this, got all the features we need. Boom. So we bought it. I forget how much it was, 10, 12,000 baht or something like that. And we bought one with regular size wheels, I don't know, like maybe 4 or 5 inches across, regular size stroller wheels. And Bangkok sidewalks are not made for stroller wheels that small, because we were, my kid was getting whiplash in the seat.
Okay. So let me to clarify. So you bought essentially a normal stroller, and then you realized that the wheels were too small.
Yes, exactly. Because we're pushing that down the sidewalk, and it's like coink, 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 and your wheels are sinking and clicking and clacking on the uneven sidewalks and the pavement and the bricks and the potholes. So within a few weeks, we were back at the mall and we're like, we need a stroller with big wheels.
This is good insider. This is the kind of thing that if you were a new expat with kids, this would be super. I mean, seriously, our listeners should, we need more patrons. So if you're not a patron, this is gold. This is gold.
It's not something you think about back in Canada, where I'm from. Right? Like,
I would not be looking at the size of the wheels of the stroller.
No, because you don't have to worry about, because the sidewalks are all smooth, and if there's a pothole, it's fixed pretty quickly.
Yeah, we've talked about how this is the ankle breaker city, so it makes sense that if you're in an ankle breaker city, you need big wheels on your stroller.
Totally, yeah. So that was the one that we learned pretty quickly. Another one is this doesn't only apply to Thailand, but it's especially true in Thailand. For the longest time, for about a year, I resisted getting a car because I'd never had a car in Thailand up until then. When my son is 6, so I had been here 14 years at the time. And why would you need a car? At the time, there was Uber, there was Grab, there was taxis everywhere. There was a BTS that went close to my house, close to my job, close to where I wanted to go.
Dude, you're preaching to the converted. One of my greatest revelations living here, as a guy who grew up in the suburbs, which are very car focused. In the suburbs, you can't go anywhere without a car.
Right.
So I'm not a city guy, but now I am. After 21 years in Thailand, I'm a city guy, and I love not owning a car, and I love not driving.
Really?
So I love it. Yeah, it's just the greatest. It's the greatest thing ever. I mean, we haven't talked about taxis. I feel like it's funny. I feel like my first 2 years on the podcast, we talked a lot about my theories of taxis.
Yeah.
Because I'm just I'm a taxi. I love it. I love not driving. I love. It sounds weird, but I love not being in control because I don't have to pay attention to traffic. So I could do whatever I want in the back of the taxi.
Yeah, there's a certain freedom that comes with that. But I'll tell you what, you want to do a quick 180, have a kid. I was like, we can just take the SkyTrain. Well, there's a lot of times that side of the SkyTrain doesn't have an escalator or an elevator. So you got to haul the kid and the stroller up the stairs.
Interesting.
And it's hot a lot. So you're walking 5, 6, 7 blocks to the BTS. It's just, it extra sucks not having a car here.
Interesting. I see your point. In a way, obviously you do sometimes see young kids on the BTS or MRT, public transportation, but it is kind of inconvenient and it looks very stressful. I would not have guessed this, but I see your point that, it's like the bottom line is if you can get a car, it's better to just be in control of all of that yourself.
Yeah, dude, we have a car now, and it's a goddamn dream. I'm never going back. And we take the SkyTrain too sometimes. Like if we're going to a place that's on the SkyTrain, great, love it. It's a good way to see the city, and it's good for a kid to get out and learn those types of things and how to deal with those types of things. But also, I'll give you a quick story. One time when my son was about 6 months old, we were going to swimming class, and we got a taxi because who needs a car, right? There's taxis everywhere. So we got a taxi.
Of course.
And he took a wrong turn and we got onto an expressway. All right, fine, no big deal.
Oh, geez.
But the guy didn't know where to go, and we were driving down the expressway, and he had the option of either continuing straight on the expressway or taking the exit on the left. So he wasn't sure where to go. So what he did was he stopped in the little space between the exit and the thing. So cars are like phew, phew, flying by.
Wait, you can't do that? Wait, you mean you can't do that? I thought there's no thinking zone? I thought there was a thinking zone.
Yeah, right. Well, normally it wouldn't be a massive problem, but there's no car seats in taxis and there's no seat belts in taxis. So this guy stopped in the most dangerous place of all. And me in the back seat with a 6-month-old baby on my lap. Like if we got clipped by a car, it would have been lights out, right? So
Nightmare.
Yeah, it's something that is it makes the whole thing way more stressful to deal with. And once you get a car, it's like some guy lifted a giant boulder of stress off your shoulders, and you're just like, I'm in control of where we go and how we get there.
No, I mean, this is fascinating because for me, to me, driving is stressful. So I have access to a car. You know, my family owns a car, and I sometimes when I've taken long trips in the past, you know, during my first 10 years here, I would rent a car.
Yeah. But
I've never liked driving in Bangkok. I've never liked it.
I quite enjoy it, actually. I don't mind it at all. But
to me, it's just stressful. Bangkok. I mean, it's a cliche. Bangkok traffic is stressful. So that's why you should pay someone else to deal with it.
That you do have a point, but if you can deal with it and you have a kid, it's well worth the expense of having a car to have some control over that.
I see.
Yeah. So another really quick thing that you need to get, I know a lot of people have these, but when you have a kid, this is very, very important. You need an air purifier, especially
for every kid. No, I know your son has some allergies, but are you saying an air purifier? Everyone's got to get one.
I think it's probably a very good investment because, especially in recent years, Bangkok now has the crappy air quality season. So, you know, when you can't go outside because the air is so bad for a few weeks at a time, you know, kids are vulnerable to this kind of thing. And it's something that, if I was just by myself, I'd probably just deal with it because at this point I'm jaded and, you know, I've been breathing polluted air for years already.
Why does it matter?
Yeah. Talking through a voice box. Who needs it? But, but if you've got a little kid in the house, you see the air quality outside and you're like, if you don't have one, you're like, God, I think I should. It's probably negligent not to get one.
No, I mean, it makes sense. That's right. And you're right. I would not have, I'm much more willing to sacrifice my own health. But then when you're talking about a kid who's vulnerable, it's not their choice. And it's just, everyone knows that on average, air quality in Bangkok is bad, like bad in quotes. This is a good point. I think it's a damn good point.
A small point, but an important one. Yeah.
Good point.
And the next one is actually something that I think is important to think about, especially in Thailand, because kids talk, kids gab. They don't have that natural filter. They don't have that understanding of nuance and cultural rules and appropriateness, right?
Sure.
So you got to watch what you say in Thailand, because if you sort of say the wrong thing at home too many times, say, for instance, if I was criticizing a certain person or family or, whatever, then I am not sure if my kid is going to go to school and innocently say something like, oh, yeah, my dad doesn't like so-and-so.
I see. Interesting.
Now, think about that. That can probably cause a lot of waves.
Yeah, so this is one of those things that the general point makes sense. We know that in Thailand, you can't really enjoy the freedom of speech we enjoy back home. And you kind of, the way I look at this stuff, and when I talk to my students about it, is it's so particular, and you just kind of have to have good judgment, because when you have the experience or you've been here, you know there's certain lines that you can't cross. Yeah. And you're right, that I would have never thought of this, but you're right. So then so even at home, where you normally would think that, I can say whatever I want, it's my home, right?
Right.
But now you're thinking like, okay, now there's someone who's going to hear this and possibly repeat it. Oh, okay. So
it's the old cliche of like, a kid going to school and, the kid saying something like to the teacher, like, oh, my mom says that Joey's mom is fat, every kid's got an embarrassing moment like that. But, in Thailand, there is the potential for an offhand comment like that about the wrong person to carry some maybe unforeseen circumstances. So it's something to think about.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's all kinds of expat families, and so this would be something that I think if it was an expat and a Thai person, I think that the Thai person would kind of be able to moderate this, but this would be the kind of thing that would be very important for an expat. If the parents were both expats and they're here in Thailand, I think this would be something that they might not know. Like they could really make a horrible mistake.
Right. Yeah. So the kid's not going to get in trouble. It's going to come back to the parents. So
in the long run, sure.
I'm not saying that this forces you to censor yourself or talk, dictate how you talk to your kids or anything like that. But it's just one of those things that you're like, well, if it goes wrong, it's going to go wrong in a big way.
That's right. Yeah. You got to add it to your calculation.
That's right. Yeah. And the last thing I want to get into is that if you're a parent in Thailand, you're going to have to be ready to deal with some weird rituals and advice, even from people who have kids, not only from people without kids. So
wait, what do you mean?
Well, one of the things that I hear a lot from my wife and the Thai people apparently are very concerned about is kids getting bow legs.
What?
Have you ever heard anything like that?
That's like a thing? That's like an issue?
Like when my son sits on the floor, like you remember how you're sitting on the floor, like not kneeling down with your feet under you, but you have your feet sort of splayed to the side a little bit.
Oh, okay, sure.
My wife will be like, "Don't sit like that. You're going to have bow legs."
Wait. Okay, this is interesting. So you think this is kind of a Thai? It's interesting. This is kind of a Thai parenting culture issue. So you think Thai parents are particularly concerned about this?
I've heard it from my wife a lot of times. I've read it online, and I've heard it from friends too. Is that a thing? I've never heard that.
I don't know. I was just going to say, is that a thing? I'm like, I don't know. If there's science behind it, I'll believe it. But
yeah, exactly. But I've never heard that from any of my friends who've had kids in Canada. From any of my Western friends.
It's funny. This just reminds me of in my critical thinking class, which we've talked about, and how, when I teach it, I have to be careful how I teach it. But I talk about the common advice that Thais give when people are sick is that you shouldn't drink cold beverages.
Yep. Same.
And as far as I know, again, not a doctor, from what I can tell, is that there's no research to back that up. There's no science that says if you have a cold, you shouldn't drink cold water.
No. My son had a sore throat one time, and I gave him an ice cream, and my mother-in-law lost her mind.
That's right. And again, not a doctor, so I don't want to be definitive about it. But it's. I do think there's this kind of like cultural advice.
Yeah. Your kid is caught outside in the rainstorm for 14 seconds. That's pneumonia. You got to be ready for that.
Right. Yeah, sure. Right. Got to watch out for pneumonia.
And the last thing is that if you do have a baby here, and if it's a Lucroon kid or if it's a small baby, you'll probably at some point either experience it yourself or be asked to do it, and that's shaving your baby's head. I think at
shaving their head?
6 months or 8 months or something like that.
Why?
Dude, it's a thing. When my son was born, he was young. My mother-in-law, who was very awesome, would always jokingly say, like, we're going to shave his head because it guarantees the hair grows back thick. And in my mind, I'm like, that makes no sense whatsoever. By that level of reasoning, there would be no bald people in Thailand at all because everyone's had their head shaved and they would guarantee a thick, which we know is not true.
Right.
But it's an old Chinese custom as far as I understand it. So
shave. Okay, let me clarify. The custom is to periodically shave a kid's head.
Not periodically, once at the right time. I think when they're 6 months old or 8 months or something like that. So for our patrons, I'm going to include a photo of my son when he was, when he was young, because I was like, no, it's stupid. It doesn't make a difference. That's all determined by genetics. Obviously, shaving his head makes no difference to this in the long run. It's not going to happen. So I come out of the bedroom one day, and there's my son being held by his mom on the floor, getting his head shaved by Kunyai.
So what you're trying to tell me is that what you said didn't really matter. I'm shocked.
No, because I'm an idiot foreigner, and obviously I don't know what I'm talking about.
So when they look at you, they just see like lips flapping. They're like, yeah, whatever he's saying.
To be honest,
whatever he's saying.
Most people probably do. But my son looked like a little Lex Luthor with his head like, fully shaved.
Jeez,
So,
God, this is all completely new to me. I had no idea that this was a Thai thing.
Yeah, so bow legs, shaved head. Get ready to deal with it.
Wow. Okay. I'm not sure that's not much of a sales pitch.
All right. Well, that was just a couple of items that parents in Bangkok have to think about when they're dealing with kids. If you don't have kids and you're not going to have kids, you don't have to worry about it. But if you are going to have kids or have young ones, maybe you should think about some of these things. So,
or now there were people who thought they wanted to have kids, but now they don't. Thank you, Greg.
That's right. Or people who definitely wouldn't, but do. Anyway, there's all types of people out there is our point. And yeah, so good times. Never a dull day in Thailand.
No doubt.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of life in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. Last time I asked Ed what he thought about happy birthday, without your name. So this week it is Ed's turn to ask me something.
All right, Greg, I got something for you. I think this is kind of classic, but I got to admit it's not like a super common thing. But I think in my experience, my memory of when I first got here, this was a thing that, I don't know, just seemed different.
All right.
Okay. So what I'm talking about here is, I think this idea of using a toothpick and then covering it with their other hand.
Yeah, raise your hand, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. What's your take on this? I was trying to think of, just if there was any original. I'm trying to go back. I'm on my 21st anniversary. I'm thinking that I just remember when I first got here, just being in restaurants and just seeing people like moms and whatever putting their hands over their face. I'm like, what are they doing? I realized, they're cleaning their teeth with a toothpick, right after the meal, which again, I'm doubting myself, but that's less common back home.
Now, this is a great one. This is a fantastic one because when I first got here, I noticed it all the time. I hardly ever flossed or use a toothpick at home unless it was a particularly gnarly piece of meat. I
might be wrong, but are you on the same page that back home, normally people don't use a toothpick in public, or it would be less common, right? I mean, you might use a toothpick at home or floss or something.
Yeah, using it in public after dinner is not common. I never did. I don't
remember that.
I remember seeing this for the first time too. I thought it was the weirdest thing, but I'll tell you what, now, if I was to sit at a table anywhere in the world and pick my tooth without covering my mouth, I'd feel like a savage.
Of course. I mentioned the covering the mouth thing because I specifically remember not understanding what they were doing. Because their hand is over their mouth. And, you can see there's some motion there, but I specifically remember like, what are they doing?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I thought it was super strange, but now I do it all the time. I guess I love it.
What do you mean? You do this? I mean, so are you saying that you use a toothpick at the table after a meal?
Yeah. Yeah. And if I didn't cover my mouth, I'd feel like I was breaking some kind of gross rule.
No, I'm with you. I think the cover the mouth thing, it looks weird because I don't remember whatever. It's clearly better than just doing it.
Yeah, I don't want to see you digging it in your teeth.
Again, it's funny. It's like I really have doubts now. Maybe this is a sign of. It's either a sign of just how old I am, absolutely, or how long I've been in Thailand. I just can't remember this back home. Like I feel like I want to go back home and have dinner with a bunch of people and see if anyone takes a toothpick and covers. Do they cover their mouth? Like that covering the mouth thing. It's just I don't remember saying that before.
I don't either, but now I'm firmly love. I think it's a great idea. If you're going to pick your mouth with a toothpick, cover it with your hand.
Damn, this is somewhat. I don't want to bring it up, dude, but this is a little bit like the ketchup on the pizza. You've gone native, man. Maybe that's the theme. That's the theme of our recent shows. Greg has gone native.
That's right, and it's usually more often than not, it's me picking a piece of ketchup-covered ham out of my teeth after eating a pizza. But I'm a love. I think it's a great idea.
All right, I'm gonna go live with. Definitely don't loathe it, but it's just weird and it's different. So I'm just gonna go live with.
All right, cool, good one.
Alrighty, a final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
That's right. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can send us a voicemail online that we will feature on the show. Hit us up on Discord. Reach out to me directly on Twitter where I'm BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone. Stay safe. See you back here next week.
For sure. So let me know if it's, I think, from looking at the waveform that it should be okay, but.
Guess we'll find out if we have to re-record the entire show again at the end.
That would be a nightmare. That's what I'm trying to stop here.
Which has happened. In every season, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. No, not in 5.
What is? Oh,
where we had to some mess up or something.
At least one show. Oh,
yeah.
Well, it's usually me. I mean, obviously in recent times, it's definitely been me messing something up. But yeah, I don't want to jinx it. So I'm on a good run.
Nothing will ever be the time we showed up at Christy Kenny's house, the American ambassador in season 1.
That story's incredible.
At 7 a.m. ready to go, and she had her whole staff ready for us, and Tony had deleted the software from his computer to record.
That's just a great story.
Brutal. All right.